All right, I'm going to talk to you guys about flat tips and Reversa tips and some of the myths and mysteries about why typically I don't use flat tip or Reversa tips, and a lot of things that people think they have to use a Reversa tip because of these reasons. And I'm going to explain to you why that might not be a very good realm of truth that you're using to make your decision. So, yes, we're going to go over these things like one at a time here. All right, so reason number one, this is a flat tip, this is a Reversa tip. They basically do the same thing. They atomize the material, and they both last about the same amount of time. And this is one of the things that I see as a farce. A lot of guys will take one of these and they'll run it 100 million more gallons than it should. They should both run about, on the average, I'm going to say in flat paint, about 100 gallons or so per tip. Now this costs about $5. These cost about 30. That's a little bit of a difference in price. So that's just, to me, $30 every time you go through 100 gallons is a lot of money to spend. And they should be lasting about the same amount of time. So a lot of guys are saying, well, I think these are better because, I don't get gun spits. I don't get all this stuff. Okay, we're going to go over each one of those things. Or I don't get plug ups as often and all that other stuff. So they go and spend $30 versus spending $5. Makes no sense to me. So if you're running a Reversa tip setup, you probably shouldn't be running one of these guns. This is a Silver Plus Graco gun, and this line is toast. I'm gonna kill it today. I'm gonna order one right now. In fact, I ordered one. I got the wrong size. Anyway, it was on the kill list. But so anyway, this Silver Plus gun probably shouldn't be the gun to use with a a Reversa tip, and the reason is because this gun does not have a filter. So that's what the issue is. And a lot of times guys will run one of these and they'll run the gun filter, a fine gun filter, and then they won't run one of these. Okay, because if you're running one of these cone filters, and you can run a cone filter with and use a silver gun, and it's no problem. You can do it if you want to. That's why I'm saying you probably shouldn't. Doesn't mean you shouldn't. So if you're using a silver gun and you want to use a Reversa tip, this is the housing, Reversa tip housing. This is a flat tip housing. It normally has a guard like this on it, but I rip it off because it's being a pain in the butt. You get coated in paint. OSHA says you got to have it, so you should always have one. You should be using one. I'm not telling you not to do it, but this is just me. So if you're running one of these guns, what you have to do in order to be able to do it is you need to have a filter at your tip. Always. You should always have a filter. If you can run the gun filter in lieu of that, okay, if you have a contractor gun, you can run one of those and run one of these and have at it all day long. Yeah. The reason I don't like that is it's, number one, it's heavier. This is a lighter gun. When you're moving like this all day long, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference with your body later. You'll have less shoulder issues when you get older if you have a lighter spray gun. All those types of things add up over time. So to use one of these guns, you need something called a cone filter adapter. And that's what this thing is right here. So you put it on here, you put your cone filter in. If I can show you that. And you put this on, and now you can put the larger head. There used to be a manufacturer that made Reversa tips housing that was a smaller. This is, I think, 11/16. I forget what that one is. I forget what size the big one is. I'm not sure. But I think this one's 11/16. They used to make one that, went on here. You had a smaller one of these for your Reversa tip. But I don't think they do now, so they use an adapter. Put this adapter on, now you can put this on here. and extends it out a little bit further, whatever, kind of, if you want to do that direction. The reason that I have this is because if I'm doing something with a fine finish tip, if I'm using a fine finish tip, then I will use a Reversa, okay? Because fine finish tips, if you've ever tried to clean a flat tip fine finish, you will do it once, and then you'll be like, never again. It is a real pain. When these, all you have to do, if you get a plug up, usually I can just take the spray gun and tap it like that, and pretty hard, and it'll push whatever it is through. That's if I have a plug up. Not very often do I get them, but I do get them every once in a while. If I have a really bad plug up, I'll take this off, and you flip this over. This is how they came up with the idea, Reversa tip. You'll turn your tip upside down, and you put it in here, no filter on it, and you put it on, and it looks like this on the other end when it goes in straight. It looks like that. And you dunk it underneath your paint or your water. Okay, dunk it under paint or water. Turn it upside down like that, so it's like that. And you dunk it under your paint or your water. You give it a little squirt, and that will clean out that tip usually every time. And then you put it back together with your cone filter in here, and you put your tip back in and tighten it up. You know, and guys will tell you, you know, this is the whole reason that they started the Reversa tip theory, is they said, oh, well, this eliminates you from having to do all that. Well, I'm going to explain to you that you're probably going to have to do that anyway. You should be doing that anyway if you're using one of these types of guns. To use the Bitchin' Silver Plus gun, you do need a cone filter, right? And every 2 to 5 gallons, you need to take off this feller right here. Even if you got a Reversa tip in there, and you have to take this off and clean this filter out. Because once it starts getting plugged or a little bit restricted, it starts to spray funny, and it won't work quite. You'll start to lose your atomization. It gets kind of loses pressure. It gets a little weird. So you got to take this off and clean it. So regardless of whether you're using a flat tip or Reversa tip, you still have to take it off and clean this filter out. Even if you strain your paint, you still need to take this off and clean it. It will get stuff through it that nothing else will. But the good thing about using one of these filters, and this is the medium, or I think the fine mesh one, I use these the most. I only use the coarser one when I'm using an 821 or an 823. If you guys ever spray big stuff, you'll be using one of those tips every once in a while. Then you might want to have the coarser one. But most of the time, most of you guys are painting houses. Now we're using smallest tip we can to use a little less paint. I think I'm using about a 515 most of the time now. When I used to use a 619 all day long, that was the only tip I had. I'd use it on a garage door, and it didn't bother me. But you use a lot more material with that. So anyway, that's why I don't do it now. Because if you didn't notice, the materials are through the roof. So number one reason, a lot more money. Number two reason, if you're using a Silver Plus gun, you're going to have to take this off anyway and clean it. So don't think you're going to get around it by having a Reversa tip. It really does you no good to have one of these, because you're going to take it off, you're going to clean the filter, put it back on. You're going to do that 2 or 3 times on 4 times on a job, 5 times on a job, regardless. I've strained my paint and everything, and I still end up with stuff in this. And one of the things, when you strain your paint, it's best to not push the paint through. Yeah, that just doesn't work. You spin it around until it won't go anymore, and then, you know, let whatever's get in there, whatever's in that bag, stay in there. Don't try and push it through. That's a lot of times the guys do. They'll grab that strainer and they just push it like this, and I did it like that before myself. So don't feel stupid if that's what you're doing, because you're pushing the stuff through the strainer bag. That's what's happening. And you still end up with stuff in your paint. So anyway, if you strain it, you're still going to have stuff in here. So number 2 reason, you're going to be taking it off anyway. Number 3 reason, and this is the biggest one for me, is you get less overspray. You get less fallout with a Reversa tip with a flat tip than you do with a Reversa. These things most of the time have like a little wire inside of them, and the wire, when it goes through there, it messes with the atomization and makes it turbulent when it comes through the tip, and you'll see little swirlies coming off the edges of your tip. You will notice if you use a flat tip, you will not see that, and that's why I use flat tips the most, because I want to get less overspray. I want to have a nice clean spray. I want to be able to use a cardboard shield and have less issues. So that's the primary reason I use the flat tip. So those are kind of them in a nutshell. So if the ways you can use a Reversa, if you really just want to pay $30 every time you go to the store, and that's up to you, go for it. But if you want to do that, the best way to do that is to use a contractor gun, which is heavier. And when you're my age, you're going, oh, my shoulder doesn't work anymore. Maybe you should have listened in the video a long time ago, and you would have learned something then. But that's the way it is. So if you want to do it the other way, you can get the contractor gun that has a filter right here in the handle, and it also has paint inside the handle, which makes it heavier. And then when it goes through there, it'll help atomize it, and then you can just eliminate using this guy, and you'll still have a lot of plug ups, and you'll be going like this all the time, you know, spinning it back and forth, feeling like you're doing something and all the other stuff, when you could have just went, oh, hey, let me put a cone filter on, and let me put one of these flat tip housings on, okay, and I know for sure average time I'm going to plug up once a day, and I'm going to have to go over to the spray rig and take this off my wrench, and I'm going to clean it, and I'm going to also, while I'm there, I'm going to clean my filter out, and then you'll put this back on, you'll keep spraying. And typically, if your filter is not bad, what happens is guys will run these too long, and the other thing they'll do is they'll run the tips too long. Let's talk about the problems with those things as well. So if you're starting to have plug ups with your spray, you just get your little handy bag out like this, like I've got right here, with a bunch of tips and filters. And then I will change my filter, put a new one in, and usually all my plug ups stop at that point because there's some little orifice that's in this thing here that's got a little too far open. So that's usually what happens, and I have to toss this little feller in the trash, and they're $5 for these. They're not expensive, so it's no big deal. So still cheaper than buying one of these. All right, so here's the problem what the guys do all the time with Reversa tips. They use them way too long because they're $30. So I've seen guys that have never changed these. They've been running them so long. You know how much money you've wasted in material because you did that? You're putting on the paint over millage, putting it on way too thick, and you've wasted your money. So it's better to buy a new tip every once in a while. But what guys do is they'll overrun these tips. They'll run them and run them and run them and run them. So now the numbers on here, a 517 is a 5, you double that number, so that means it's a 10-inch fan. A 5 is a 10-inch fan, and that's a 17 thousandths hole. Okay, and so now that 17 thousandths hole, because it's run a whole bunch of flat through it, it's now 21 thousandths. But instead of being shaped like a little slit, it's shaped like this. So now what's happening is when your paint goes through, if you do a fan test on your wall, say you just pull the trigger real quick, you'll notice that the fan looks like this, like an oval. Okay, it looks like an oval on the wall. That's because your tip's blown out. Now when you're running with a blown out tip, you're putting paint on too heavy right here, and maybe not too heavy enough over here. So now you're putting on this extra heavy coat down the middle, and it's striping as you're putting it on, and you don't notice it. In fact, it's usually unnoticeable, but you're wasting a lot of material. So when paint's, $30, $40, $50, $60 a gallon, don't come crying to me because you wasted all your material because you're using one of these tips, because you've been using it too long, trying to save money by not replacing it. And you got to replace them. I mean, it's the reason why I got this whole bag right here. But what did that cost me? I think I paid $4.50 a piece for them. Bought them online. Versus, that would have been $300 or $400 for that bag. I don't think that even cost me $50. Okay. So, because the reason I have this whole bag of them is because I replace them about every 100 gallons, right around there. And I'll keep the old ones because there's times when you'll want a blown out tip. I mean, I can't explain all the times when you're going to want one, but there's times when you're going to want a blown out tip. They can do some things better if you're doing like an interior flat with their really grainy flat. It might work better to have a little bit of a blown out tip. So you want one that's got some miles on it. Maybe you'll have one with about 90 gallons on it, or around 100, and it's not quite blown out yet. So, because you tested it, you checked it on the wall, and the fan isn't too bad. But what happens is the edges of that fan, the top and the bottom of the fan, will have a little tiny bit of a fan edge finger. People call that a finger, but it's not a finger, it's just a fan edge. And that fan edge will be gone. And there's times when you want that fan edge to be gone, like if you're spraying ceilings in a house, you're going to want that fan edge to be gone. So, a couple of things. So, about tips again, when you're spraying flat, they don't last as long. When you're spraying enamel, they're going to last a long time. You might get 300 gallons or more out of a enamel tip. Depends on the grade of the enamel. If it's high grade enamel, tip's going to last longer. If you're using cheaper enamel, they have clay in them and stuff like that. And the enamel, even though it's still enamel, which enamel is semi-gloss, satin, anything with a sheen. Flat is just flat. Okay, so if you're using flat paint, your tip's going to wear out a lot faster. If you're using enamel paint, your tip's going to last a lot, can last a lot longer, depending on the grade. If it's really high grade, that means it's real smooth when you feel it with your fingers. The cheaper stuff will, still be shiny, but not be very smooth. And those ones will wear out fast, just like the flat. So anyway, one thing to learn, if you're using these and you're insistent on using one of these, change it every 100 gallons. And then tell me you still want to use them, because you'll be like, oh my God, it's expensive. Yes, it is. Okay. And the other thing is every time you use that thing, you go, the 1 or 2, 3 times you flip it over to reverse and you pull the trigger and jump your spit out, wherever you're spitting that, that's up to you. I mean, sometimes guys spit them in the middle of a wall or something like that. No, that ain't happening. I get mad when people do that. A big old loogie in the middle of the wall. No. So anyway, if you're turning this thing over a lot, then you probably need one of these. So it's better if you're using one of these. So if you're using a flat tip, this thing is talking to you every time you you start getting a lot of plug ups. It means your filter's bad. All right, it means you need to change this feller. All right, and if you're having paint issues or whatever, something's plugging up or whatever, it's going to tell you. You're going to think to change it more often. You're going to think, oh, is that one blown out? Well, it's kind of blown out. I better get a new one. And when this one, you're just probably going to keep it in the box and use it for, 20 years and forget about it. When it's going to stop doing its job, you're going to have that bullseye spray. Middle of your fan pattern is going to be much heavier than the outside edges. You're just wasting material. So anyway, yeah, when paint's $100 a gallon, which may be pretty soon, maybe you'll want to change then. But anyway, it's up to you. Do it however you want. If you want to do this setup, then do it. If you want to do this thing, you might want to just go to a contractor gun and use one of these. But honestly, you're not saving anything anywhere. You're not saving time. You're not saving money. You're not saving anything by going this direction. You know, it's just a different way. You're gaining overspray. You know, there's a lot of losses. That's why I don't use these typically. The thing I'll use them for, and I'll tell you what, if I'm spraying cabinets and I want a very fine finish, I will get the double orifice. You know, they come in like it'll say like instead of a 17, it comes in a 16. It comes in an even number on the right. So your 5 is your fan, right? Your 17 is your orifice size. They'll come in a 6 or 5, 16, a 4, 14, you know, a 3 or whatever you're going to get in whatever size, 3, you know, 18 or whatever. You know, it just depends on what size you're getting. So your right two numbers are going to be an even number instead of an odd. And that will tell you that you have a double orifice tip. And there's 2 orifices inside there, inside the Reversa. And those, all you do is flip it over, spray through it, and then flip it back, and it starts working again. When, if you have one of these, it's a whole episode of unscrewing things and, you know, putting it in some sort of cleaner. It's a nightmare to clean those. And you can't put any kind of pins. Don't poke the orifice with anything. Don't take a little wire and poke it through that orifice. You've ruined the tip. Throw it away. It's no good. So same thing here. You know, this is kind of why everybody went to these, is because guys would take these and they would poke it with a wire. Oh, it doesn't work any good anymore. These work great. The problem is guys abused them and they didn't know how to use them. So they went to this system and they thought, oh, this is better. And look at the paint companies made tons of money on this. So anyway, if you want to contribute to that, go for it. Buy an Apple computer while you're at it too. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hope this helped you out.